And we have looked at several challenges that occur in the path of the CEO as he moves forward in a new organization. And greater the challenge, greater would be the need for a cultural buy-in. In today's competitive world, the investors, including the founders and promoters, have a relentless focus on continued growth in revenues and profits. That is given. But then when a new CEO comes in and he looks at the situation, there may be three questions which would arise. One, is there a need for radical business restructuring? Is it likely to cause organizational disruption? And what are the gestation times involved in this? And if radical business restructuring is required, it is very important to detail the pros and cons, articulate and advocate. Otherwise, any business restructuring is bound to fail. Second, if you are going to disrupt the organization, you must focus on visible talent. You are disrupting the organization for a reason. If you are bringing in talent, it should be for a reason, and that reason should be visible. The people who are trained within the organization for new tasks, the people who are brought in from outside to perform those tasks should be very visible in terms of their performance metrics, in terms of their capabilities. So once that happens, you can effectively counteract organizational disruption that could occur. And third, any project could be of long gestation, particularly in an entrepreneurial setup, moving into a mainstream setup. So how do I stage gate the progress, and what are the course correction points? So if these three aspects are taken care of through these 6 points, the initiatives and plans are in a position to be clearly articulated to the stakeholders, and the CEO's responsibility is to ensure that these answers are clearly explained, alignments are properly made, misunderstandings are effectively addressed, and a broad cultural buy-in is achieved. We have so far considered that leadership transitions in entrepreneurial firms or even other firms happen because the founders realize the need for leadership transition. But there could also be cases where the founders do not have that realization. In such a case, what would happen? More often than not, if founders are oblivious for the need for leadership change or certain changes in themselves, the founders are likely to flounder. I have got certain quotes that are developed from 2 papers, very interesting papers, which are referenced and which are reproduced below in terms of their details. The first quote is that almost 80% of founder CEOs, they have investigated or they have researched, are reluctant to give up control over their companies. At the crux of the matter, a founder's resistance to change is simply due to his or her inability to let go and accept that he or she is no longer the right person of the job. So that is the fundamental foundation for founders floundering in taking their companies to the next level. As a corollary, while a founder's passion is vital to take the leap of faith to start a company, passion can be lethal if it is not kept in check and complemented by relevant skills and experience. It is like, comparing ownership and possessiveness as being the same. No, they are not. Ownership is taking accountability to what one is doing, whereas possessiveness is ensuring that nobody else gets into the space because that space is yours. Similarly, passion, if it is taken to the extreme level, it could be a lethal parameter for a company because it is not allowing others to think independently, it is not allowing others to contribute with their points of view, and tunnel vision could be the ill effect of unbounded passion of a founder. They could start seeing the entire operations through their own rose-colored lenses. They tend to overestimate the chances of their success and have excessive attachment to the products and businesses that they have nurtured, and that is in turn primed by their attachment to the ideas and abilities and knowledge that they possessed so far. Similarly, when entrepreneurs are extremely passionate, they fail to see the competitors in their appropriate light. They tend to underestimate their competitors. They tend to underestimate their ability to come up with novel solutions. They don't fully understand the resource requirements. And most importantly, they fail to anticipate the emergencies. So when the founder's self-obsession, or one may call narcissism, goes to an extreme level, it is likely to lead to their firms floundering. So the only way in which you can again address this is by being process strong. So there are three ways in which you can become process strong. One is the structural portion. You need to have a board of directors, you need to have a board of advisors, and in your team you need to have process experts, that is how to conduct a process properly. That is, if you are doing supply chain management, how do I manage my supply chain, or rather how do I establish supply chain and manage it effectively? They are the process experts. Then you should have subject matter experts, the technology experts, the material evaluation experts, the quality experts. Then there should also be execution warriors who know how to go about and install a facility, how to install a machinery, how to construct a facility. That's very important. The second aspect to be process strong is for the entrepreneur himself or the leader to be introspective, reflective, and accepting mentoring. These are the three aspects of process strength in an organization. The third is the openness, which is at every stage of the startup's development. The founder CEOs need to ask of themselves very tough questions, whether what is being done is right for the company, not for one's own intellectual satisfaction that one should be doing. What one is doing should be right for the company. That is the first set of questions. In this process, the board or the boards, if there are two boards, should help the CEO recognize that the best decisions are the ones that serve all the shareholders and not merely a few investors or the founders or few subject matter experts. That's very important. That is the second point. And the third, introspection by the CEO, by the CXOs, and mentoring from the outside boards. It helps right and timely decision making. It helps create a pool of viewpoints from which the right kinds of decisions can be originated by the teams. Again, tightrope walk. Managing an entrepreneurial organization by a professional CEO is a tightrope walk, which is even more challenging than managing an established organization, because product development is essential for the success of an entrepreneurial organization, but it requires increasing investments. It is capital intensive. More products, you will be successful entrepreneurially, but it's capital intensive because products are not yet generating returns. In an established milieu, as you market new products, they generate revenues and they fund newer product developments, but not so in an entrepreneurial context. Therefore, while product development is essential, we have to recognize that it is capital intensive and is experimental. Second, business development is essential. You can't just rest on your oars, just developing products. You got to develop your business. That means you got to develop your markets. You got to have new customer arrangements, but that requires successful product development. Therefore, at the core is the funding requirement. So the stronger the funding availability, the wider and the stronger would be the tightrope on which the entrepreneurial leader is walking. So over splurging, fundraising, that is one extreme. Conservatism, cash conscious is another thing. So how do I balance? You can balance this by stage gating execution and stage gating fundraising. Do not take too much of funds in the beginning, nor should you delay the fundraising to a late stage. So balanced fundraising as well as balanced stage gating of performance helps the leader do the tightrope well. Now, CEOs should not be only textbook CEOs. There should be smart CEOs as well. Whole entrepreneurial milieu, whole entrepreneurial infrastructure or the ecosystem is based on smartness, whether it is digital smartness or otherwise. The leadership by the CEO must also be smart. How do you do that? One, smart delegation, which is different from auto delegation. It is not that you can delegate everything and hope to be in control of what is happening. So, smart delegation, delegate what people can do. You keep to yourself what you need to provide your individual performance to the table. Is not that just being a CEO, everything, you are no longer an individual performer and you can delegate everything to all others. It is not so. Even the CEO has to be an individual performer in certain cases, and that must be handled. So, the mix of what you would do as an individual CEO and what you must give to your team as delegated tasks, that's the smart delegation. Second, yes, the organization has to be formal, but that formality should be handled in an informal manner. So, informal formality is the second aspect of the smartness. And third, which is another nice way of saying that there should not be any sycophants in the organization. We should never encourage a situation where it is all pupils and no masters in the organization. That is, if everybody is in a continuous learning mode in the organization, who would be providing the capability to lead and ensure that newer things are done. So, there must be a good mix of pupils and masters in the organization. Masters also should be continuously learning, and pupils of course would have to learn to the earliest possible time frame. And the ultimate objective is to have rigorous levels of competency in the organization. So, how do you achieve this spectrum of four elements? One should have cross-functional teams in the organization. One should have frequent town halls. There must be structured planning, and there must be agile execution. So, when the CEO is able to mix these 8 factors together, the CEO would be a smart CEO. And how does one also avoid the pitfalls that are there in an organization? The pitfalls essentially arise because of the distractions and detractive activities that happen in the organization. There will be, from an individual point of view, there will be distractors and detractors, and from an activity point of view, there will be distracting activities and detracting activities. At the same time, there will be supporters and well-wishers who are wanting you to succeed. So, how do you inspire them, and how do you minimize the distractions and detractions? That requires authentic management. What is authentic management? Authentic management, which is something true to itself, something which is genuine, something which is true, something which is not based on hearsay, something which is not based on biases, and something which is grounded in reality, and something which is very aspirational but which is also transparent. That is authentic management. So, to be able to succeed, you should have authentic management, which should have 3 components. One, clear plans and goals. Second, frequent checks. And third, minimal grace period. You cannot say that I am a new entrant to this leadership ecosystem, therefore I should be allowed a long period, maybe say 1 year, and 1 year is too long a period in an entrepreneurial setup. Probably even 1 month is a long period in an entrepreneurial setup. So, what is the optimal grace period one must have before one understands the organization, one understands the product market context, one develops a new strategic vision and plan, and when one starts executing the project. So, that is the grace period one must have. So, clear plans and goals, frequent checks, and minimal grace period, that would enable a new CEO avoid the pitfalls that could be inherent in any new situation. Again, I would emphasize very much that having 2 boards and 1 team, that is the hallmark of success in a new leadership change or a new leadership transition. And there are clear division of responsibilities and accountabilities for these 3 segments of top leadership. One, the board of directors primary interest is in corporate governance and overall performance management, not nitty-gritty of performance, but overall is the performance in line, like are capital requirements likely to be serviced better, or the market share growth parameters in line with what we have measured, when are the first levels of profits going to come up. So, these are the kinds of things, and whether this entire management process is being done in principles of good corporate governance. Board of advisors has completely different approach. It is not a questioning board like the board of directors. It is more in terms of coaching and mentoring. It does understand that an entrepreneurial firm will have its own vicissitudes and its own challenges, and it also understands that any entrepreneurial activity is an amalgamation of several new leading edge technologies and an amalgamation of existing components and new era components. How does one go about it? So, coaching and mentoring, benchmarking and networking, bringing in new references, bringing in new vendors into the system, helping people go that extra mile in terms of the entrepreneurial effort. That is all the remit of board of advisors. Then CEO and the team, of course, the essence of performance, planning for growth with profitability and execution with focus and adaptiveness. When you have an entrepreneurial leadership team which has got these three important segments, not necessarily equally apportioned in terms of the time or the people, but in terms of the overall responsibility, the strategic governance, the intensive coaching and the actual planning and performance, the firm will be a virtuous firm and will be able to sail very effectively in the hot waters of entrepreneurial journey. So, if you want to ensure top level organizational synergy, obviously a great no is professional CEO and founder CEO locking horns or in a state of continuous mistrust. Equally bad is founder CEO and professional CEO going into different ways, apparently not interfering with each other, but that does not help because the organization will see two power centers performing in two different manners. The ideal and effective scenario is founder CEO supplementing the professional CEO and vice versa and adding to the organizational strength. In such a situation, it is likely to be a question of synergy rather than any erosion of the skill levels of the people. And this is the ideal and effective scenario that must happen whenever a leadership transition happens. And that is where the maturity level, the competency level of the founder CEO who is giving space to the professional CEO would matter. Similarly, that is also the area where the openness and the maturity of the professional CEO in managing the founder CEO also come up as an important contribution. So, both have got their responsibilities to be executed. And to be able to do this, we have looked at this from one aspect earlier, the dealing with oneself aspect. So, other way to look at is first assimilate the dynamics of the new situation. Again, this is common in any leadership transition in any firm. Assimilate the dynamics. Second, focus on performance. And third, demonstrate growth with profitability. And that is the paradigm which one must set oneself to whenever one gets into a new position. And how do you do that? To assimilate the dynamics, you must consolidate your position. You should understand the organization thoroughly, the product market space thoroughly, and then consolidate yourself. A new CEO typically must go on a listening tour all over its domain. So that how does one achieve this? One assimilates dynamics only through a listening tour, trying to be in the field, trying to understand what are the issues, interacting with the personnel and consolidating one's presence in the organizational space. Second, because this new CEO has come to bring a change to ensure that newer competencies are built, coaching, that is an important aspect of performance improvement in the organization. And third, when an entrepreneurial firm is able to demonstrate growth along with profitability, that is the time when real transformation in the entrepreneurial space takes place. So, whether he is a founder or non-founder, a good CEO must have the following effective parameters. One, operational and strategic competencies. Strategic competency means ability to look ahead, far ahead, and imagine what would be the mega trend that would shape the industries in future. As an entrepreneur, your role was to discover a problem that has not been discovered by others and invent a solution to solve the problem. That has been the role. It's a very technology oriented, technique oriented and very creative way of looking at things. But that is the seed of an entrepreneurial firm, and out of this seed comes a huge tree of entrepreneurial firm. But these are not the same when the operational parameters are much larger and the company becomes a mainstream company. You need to see what is the next mega trend that is going to happen. You cannot think that the next mega trend will be shaped by another entrepreneur, and you cannot keep looking for that entrepreneur to emerge. While that is one viable strategy of acquiring entrepreneurial firms, but that cannot be the vision for the company. That is a strategic route to achieve a vision. So the whole space of discovering a new strategic future and creating a vision for that is one of the important competencies of the effective CEO, and that must obviously be supplemented by operational competencies to convert the strategy into effective execution. The second, at no point of time the cultural and ethical values should be compromised. There is no shortcut to long-term sustainable performance. Therefore, a culture of compliance and ethics is paramount, and the sooner that is established in a company, the better will be the long-term sustainability of the company. The third characteristic of the effective CEO, being inclusive and participative in whatever he or she does. The fourth one, we thought about it earlier, we discussed it, the introspection and reflection, that is dealing with oneself. What kind of leader I am, and how could I be a better leader in the current situation that I am there. And another important aspect, a leader would be a technical leader or a commercial leader. Put it differently, the leader could be very good with numbers, particularly the financial numbers. The leader could be very good with the technology and the technical aspects. But the leader who is technologically savvy should also be financially literate and financially competent. Similarly, if the leader is financially savvy, he should be technically literate to be able to lead a company. The grasp should be very good either way. The leader should be very deliberative, but the leader should also be very agile as to how he would execute on its plans, or rather how he would even develop the plans and execute on them, monitor them, and where necessary change them. So to kind of summarize, we need a CEO, a good CEO, founder CEO or a non-founder CEO in an organization to take the organization to the next level. And the 6 components are related to the operational and strategic competencies, cultural and ethical approaches, the moral compass, the inclusive and participative nature of the leader, ability to be reflective about oneself and then become a better person, better leader in that process, being technologically and financially competent irrespective of the domain from which he hails, and being thoughtful but also being very purposeful and very purposive in what he or she does as a leader. There is this very important aspect of advocacy in leadership. Advocacy is quite different from discussion. Discussion is basically to bring several points of view onto the table, but advocacy is to shape through discussion a certain final point of view. As a leader, you believe that the company should do a few things right and a few things in a particular manner to be able to be effective, and these perspectives are unlikely to be understood by all the constituents, by all the stakeholders in an equal measure. So there is this element of advocacy which is inherent in the CEO's responsibility. A CEO can never imagine that because of his power and authority, whatever he or she says must be seen as a mandated requirement which will be taken forward by the organization. It doesn't happen that way. So the advocacy again is multifaceted. The CEO has got investors, governments, employees, customers and vendors. These are, let's say, to simplify the paradigm, 5 principal stakeholders the CEO must address, and he or she needs to do 3 things with each of these 3 people. Demand required resources. The CEO should have the gumption and the conviction to say that I have thought about this product, this project, and this product or project has got this level of investment requirements, it will provide this level of profitability. Therefore, please provide me the funding. And it is the responsibility of the CEO not only to give targets to his or her employees, but also the responsibility to provide the resources to the employees. Otherwise, he will be seen as more a hollow CEO than as a well-meaning, well-rounded CEO. So, demanding required resources is essential for the CEO. It could be even from vendors when the CEO advocates that they should go in for new technologies to support the main company's technologies. That is an advocacy. Then ability to network with people and empower teams. So, these five stakeholders cannot be switch off and switch on kind of relationships. They have to be continuous relationships. Obviously, the relationship with employees will be day-to-day relationship, but typically again, the leader tends to have regular interactions with the CXO team and not with the employees. So, how do I network with all the people in all these stakeholder groups, and then how do I empower the teams? That is the second. And third, how do I ensure accountability? Again, accountability could be seen to be more relevant for employees, but it could also be very relevant for even vendors and customers. Accountability in the sense that your ability to follow certain procedures in providing the feedback. It is less of, let's say, mandated accountability than more as a voluntary accountability. When you see airlines announcing that at the end of every air journey that you must give, or you please give your feedback in the portal or to the customer relations executive, or a message comes to you saying that please rate our services, it is trying to get certain kind of feedback from the customers, but also it is encouraging in a very subtle way certain accountability on the part of customers, because providing feedback is one method of improving the service. Therefore, the customers are serving themselves and the other customers better by helping the organization improve its products and services. So, that is one facet of accountability which is not so evident, but very essential. So, 5 stakeholder groups, 3 types of activities, and the advocacy typically happens through 3 forms. 1, written reports like the annual report, the investor communications, the newsletters, the submissions, the advocacy proposals, etc. Second, personal discussions. Where necessary, you should be willing to go to the particular stakeholder group, make presentations and then talk to them. Particularly, let's say in a pharmaceutical company, you have got certain observations from the regulatory agencies. You must be willing to go to the agency and demonstrate your sincerity and commitment as a leader to bring the change that is required. And third, in this digital world, effectively use the instrument of remote meetings to be able to cover as large a population as possible. So, when the power and responsibility of advocacy is well understood by the CEO, you would be able to lead the company towards sustainable success.